And today we are joined with Carly. So I will just give a little bit of introduction about her. So Carly has 25 years in project management and program delivery, and 16 years in the field of sustainable mobility. She is the team leader for active mobility, digitalization, and mode integration team at the Sustainable Mobility Unit within the UN Environment Program, or UNEP. Her focus is on supporting governments to prioritize the needs of pedestrians and cyclists to reduce emissions and improve air quality, road safety, and accessibility. Carly is also leading the new UNEP program on digitalization and transport mode integration. Prior to joining UNEP, Carly was program manager for the UN Habitat Sustainable Transport for East African Cities program, supported by the Global Environment Fund, or GEF. Working with city leaders in Nairobi, Addis Ababa, Kampala to help them plan for implementation of bus rapid transit systems. Prior to that, Carly worked for the Transport for London as a project manager, designing and implementing mayoral priority projects, including the London Cycle Hire Scheme and the London Low Emission Zone. Carly is also a council member for the World Economic Forum Global Futures Council. She is an independent board member for SLOCAT, which is the International Multi-Stakeholder Partnership Powering Systemic Transportation and Just Transition Towards Equitable, Healthy, Greens, and Resilient Transport and Mobility Systems, which I believe FIA Foundation is a part of. And she's also a commission member for Cycling and for All and Sustainable Cycling Commission of the UCI, or Union Cyclists International. Carly holds an MBA and an APMPQ, which is really exciting from my world, which is Association of Project Managers Professional Qualification. So please give a round of virtual applause to welcome Carly, and thank you so much for making the time today.
Thanks so much. I love how these bios make us all sound like absolute superstars, don't they?
But you are, Carly, but you are. So.
It's good to be here. And I mean, I really see this as an opportunity to pick the brains of lots of experts working in the field of road safety and to sort of share around road safety, child health issues on the African continent. I think the most exciting thing about me is my little babies. There's 3 of them. I've got twins that are 1.5, and Eli is now 12. So based in Nairobi, Kenya, but originally from the UK, but moved to Kenya about 14 years ago. And so I run 2 teams within UNEP. One is on active mobility, which is actually the UNEP Share the Road program, which was launched with FIA Foundation in 2008. And the other one is our transport digitalization and integration program, it's a new program just started about 6 months ago, and it's looking at digitalization and also the sort of crossover of different integration modes. And if we're thinking about electric mobility, what impact does that have on buses? What impact does that have on active mobility? So it's a bit of a cross-cutting area. And basically, the Share the Road program is very much about trying to make this sort of picture the norm. Predominantly in the Africa region, that's our priority focus. So working with national governments and city governments in Africa to what I kind of think is like that initial sort of lighting the fire. So supporting governments who aren't really thinking about the needs of pedestrians or cyclists at all, and helping them put in place policies, action plans, street design guidelines, etc. And then we kind of use that on what we see as on the ground work to then sort of build that up and develop some knowledge products, and to do some regional advocacy and network building, and some global advocacy. And our lens is very much walking and cycling, and from the perspective as an environmental agency, that if you can make walking and cycling safe and comfortable, then even people who are mainly currently in their cars, using Ubers, using motorbikes, if it's safe and comfortable, then we can cross over some of those smaller, short, medium trips to walking and cycling as a complementary measure to cleaning up vehicle emissions, and introducing public transport. So that's the sort of environmental lens, but I very much see it as trying to keep the 1 billion people in Africa who are already walking and cycling safe. Not that that's the environmental agenda, but I see that as the sort of primary focus. And, you know, the title of this session was around, you know, safer walking and cycling in Africa. And of course, safety, like I just said, it's, for me, it's my sort of driving reason for running this program. But I guess the thing that I'm always thinking about is that, for me, it's so obvious that walking and cycling is the answer. You know, when the COP before last produced this big electric mobility sort of declaration, and I was just thinking, walking and cycling is the original zero emission transport, and it costs a fraction of electric, and the whole world is focused on electric, but that can't give you all of these benefits. Now, we have a huge global electric mobility program, so of course we need electric, but, you know, no matter how many electric cars we introduce, they will not deal with the congestion issues, they will not deal with the safety issues, the issues around dignity and freedom and access. So I very much see walking and cycling as the sort of focus that covers all of these benefits. So I guess my big question is to you all is, and this is what I wake up thinking about and go to bed thinking about, is if we know that walking and cycling investment gives us all these benefits, and we know that this picture is actually pretty cost effective and straightforward to achieve, you know, if you can build a multi-lane flyover, then you can build a sidewalk, right? Then why is it that this is still the norm in Africa? And what am I doing wrong for the last 10 years that I haven't been able to make the impact in this area that I want? Not that there hasn't been any impact, but it's nowhere near as fast as I think it should be. And if one person is dying in any African city just because they're trying to get to work or school, then something's still not working, right? So about a year and a half ago, we decided to take a bit of a stock take and did a baseline of what the reality is of walking and cycling in every single African country. And this report is readily available on the web. It's called Evidence and Good Practice to Inspire Action for Walking and Cycling in Africa, and we call it Inspire Africa. And it's very much about what should governments and decision makers be doing to retain all the people that are currently walking and cycling and protect them, so that as soon as they don't get a better job, they don't go and buy a motorbike or start using Uber. How can we keep and protect everyone who's already walking and cycling to keep doing it? And how can we enable more people to walk and cycle as the cleanest original zero emission transport option? So that was what the report was about. And I think the big headline for me, which we hadn't quite sort of understood before, is the exact sheer numbers that we're talking about. And this, actually, what I should mention is this report, this wasn't any new data coming out from UNEP. We were literally taking data sources that already existed and pulling them together through the lens of walking and cycling. So this data is from the WHO physical activity data. And what we worked out was that 1 billion people in Africa every single day are using active modes of transport for around an hour as their main mode of transport. And we then try to sort of understand, you know, we're doing a lot of policy work, but what other policies are out there? So we were trying to get an understanding of how many sort of national and city policies are out there. And it's, you know, this is definitely a better picture than it was 10 years ago, but there's still a lot of gaps. And of course, we know policy is the starting point. And so there could be a great policy, but if it's not being implemented, then there's no impact. So then what we did was come up with some sort of focus areas, a bit of a framework. So, you know, basically saying, number one, we know there are billions of people walking and cycling. So governments, base your action on where that demand already is. This is your biggest group of transport users, pedestrians and cyclists. So prioritize them. Then we were like, you just have to make it safe. Like, don't necessarily think about bells and whistles and gold standards. Just have some basic safe infrastructure in place and then enforce it. Then the other recommendation was around using public transport and providing access to public transport, because that's, you know, there's this huge push for bus rapid transit and light rail, and also formalizing the informal transport sector. So if you're going to put money into public transport, make sure that people can get to the bus safely. Then we talked about the comfort, and I think it's something that's really been overlooked, is about it should feel nice to walk and cycle. It should be enjoyable, and actually comfort is something that people find important. Even if they're from a low income community, they talk about being comfortable and enjoying it. So make it comfortable. And then promotion and celebrating walking and cycling and advocacy and involving citizens and car-free days. And then, of course, the policy and the political commitment has to be there as well. But we kind of put that at the end, because what we realized is even where there are very strong policies in place, that doesn't mean that there's action. And often where there's action, it doesn't mean there's a policy. So we think it's important, but definitely wasn't the be all and the end all. So, you know, the other thing that the report sort of showed is that whilst there's still a lot of work to be done, there were some really amazing case studies as well, some really good work going on in the African context. We didn't need to pull on international case studies. We could talk about the fact that Kigali is building every new walkway as run-worthy, so that you can walk and you can basically run around the city, and that they have all these car-free days, and that every Sunday there's bits of the city locked off. We talked about Addis and how they're kind of providing infrastructure for walking and cycling for 20 secondary cities. We talked about Nairobi ring fencing 20% of their transport budget for active mobility investment. So we had all these great case studies, but they're such a small scale compared to the needs of that 1 billion people. So there's a few things that we're doing sort of next, and I really wanted to kind of open it up and get, you know, perspectives on what you're doing that sort of crosses over with road safety and active mobility in the Africa context. We will continue to support at city and country level. So in 2024, we will start 7 new country projects. So Egypt, we've been supporting with a national policy, and they're about to launch that in the next few months. We've worked in Nigeria, Rwanda, Zambia, Ethiopia, Uganda, a few others. We will be putting a call out towards the end of this year to support 7 new African countries with their sort of national and city policy landscape and street design guidelines, possibly support for sort of designing and introducing car-free days. But what we realized is our program is the active mobility program is the smallest in our team. The electric mobility program, budget-wise, is like 50 times bigger. And if we keep just working at city and national level, it'll take us another 40 years to get around all of the countries in Africa. So we want to sort of start in parallel building this regional momentum, and we already host the Africa Network for Walking and Cycling, and we are now developing a Pan-African Action Plan for Active Mobility, which we call PAPAM. And we've been consulting over the last year, and we're doing 5 sub-regional consultations this year. And actually, we will be sending the second draft out for peer review to the HOSI HI network in probably about 6 weeks, and basically saying, if this is of interest to you and you want to review it, if you want to review just the road safety chapter or just the inclusion and vulnerable groups chapter, please do. And the plan is to launch the action plan at the World Urban Forum in Cairo in November. And our executive director is just about to write to every ministry, every minister of transport and every minister of environment, and UN Habitat, who are our partner on this, are writing to every ministry of urban and housing and planning and asking for a focal point, because we want to basically consult with and get the sign up from those 3 or 4 core ministries for every country in Africa by November. That's the plan. So yeah, so that was it really. I just wanted to give you a bit of flavor for what we're doing. I don't have all the answers, and I'm sorry if you came here thinking I had answers. I'm really here. These are sort of some of the questions that I have that I haven't answered yet, which is what are the critical sticking points? Why is, even though this international community is behind the road safety agenda, behind the walking and cycling agenda, what do we need to do to get that momentum for walking and cycling so that there's real change at scale on the ground? How can we use our power in numbers, our sort of joint influence better? So that includes the Child Health Initiative, this action plan, the Partnership for Active Travel and Health, the network, other channels. We've got all of these networks. How can we use them? And how do we just coordinate better? I don't really know at the moment. You know, I'm about to start a project in Ghana. If I want to find out who else is working in Ghana, I have to be like, Sani, have you got anyone working in Ghana? Then I say to ITDP, have you got any work in Ghana? Then I do the same for C40 cities and I just go round. That's how I find out, is there like a better way that we could coordinate what's happening at all of these different sort of governmental levels? And then what about the banks and the foundations? They're all the ones putting all the money into electric. What could we do to sort of influence them better? And yeah, I'll stop there. Zanny, back over to you.
No, thank you so much, Carly. A lot to unpack there. I see your hands up, Mats. Do you want to say something?
Yes, great presentation. Matt Berlin, I work for the WHO in Geneva, HQ. I'm quite new in WHO, so I'm still in a kind of learning process. But it was actually three things that I would ask you about. First of all, how do you look on power two-wheelers? I hear car-free days and that sort of thing, but the really concern we have now from a safety point is this tremendous increase of motorcycles, which will also have a great impact on public transport and everything. So that's what's one thing, so we don't miss this power two-wheelers. The second thing is that I hope that you send this letter also to WHO, because we are very much in favor of this integrated approach to these things, and clearly I can see safety is in the middle of this, of controlling for this harmful energy. If we control the speed and make it safe for from that perspective, then it will also increase the cycling and walking and all these aspects that we would like to contribute to, and also environment. So there is a really a win-win to take this integrated approach, and we should really look into it much more. And I don't know what contacts you have at the HQ, but this is something that we discussed in our department. We have these people who are working with urban health, and actually just before this meeting, we discussed this meeting in Egypt, you know, so how we can go together in this, that would be wonderful. And the third thing, because that's one part of my work now, is that I'm working with the heads of lead agencies. We have created a kind of global network of heads of lead agencies for safety around the world. This is the first recommendation in the World Report on Road Safety from 2004. And we have been working with countries to set up these, because we think that there is a very great need to see that someone driving the agenda on the national level. And most countries have actually responded to that recommendation. So now I think it's 170 countries have these kind of lead agencies. And I think this is definitely that kind of knowledge that they need to be exposed to in their role as a lead agency, because they're working in this kind of multi-sectorial environment and try to have an impact on road authorities, on urban planners and others, and they need more knowledge and more capacity to be able to deliver and be part of this discussion. And if we can do something for this lead agency in terms of this, I think that would be great. So that was 3 things for me. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Carly?
Great, thanks, Matt. All very good questions. So our main focal point in WHO is with Fiona Bull, who's leading up, and also with the road safety team. I think on 2 and 3 wheelers, completely agree with you, and it's actually partly the reason we've set up this new team, which is looking at this sort of impact of transport developments on other areas of transport. And I think, 2 and 3 wheelies are here, they're here to stay, and really it's about how we manage their impact on urban space and what regulations we can support cities putting in place. We've just produced a paper, I think it's just been published, actually just trying for our own benefit to sort of look at the different categories of different 2 and 3 wheelers, what impacts they're having, some sort of recommendations about how they could be managed in city space. We also, through our electric mobility program, we're just designing, we get a lot of funding from the Global Environmental Facility. So we're in GEF 7 at the moment, but we're moving into GEF 8, and we're including basically like a sort of think tank around the role of 2 and 3 wheelers and the impact that's having on different sectors of transport. So it's definitely, we don't have all the answers, but it's definitely something we're thinking about on a case-by-case basis with cities and national government. It's something that comes up a lot, and we tend to sort of discuss with them what their local context is and also what the sort of opportunities and challenges are, and often the policies themselves include some objectives around managing them in urban space, but that changes city to city. Yeah, like, so we've got some contacts in WHO. Like I said, we've been working with Fiona. We're actually due a catch up soon around this project with Nan as well. So maybe I could bring you into that, and we could, because the idea is at the moment, like I said, we've got these select ministries, but one conversation that came up previously was we might open that up to heads of road safety agencies and also ministries in charge of physical activity. So that would be something to discuss as well. And I think that, yeah, with regards to the capacity building, 100%. I think that's the hardest challenge, is everyone needs capacity building because active mobility is so cross-cutting. We need to bring ministries of tourism up to speed, ministries of education, health, road safety, like everyone needs the capacity building, and there's limited resources. So we tend to focus our training and support to transport ministries and transport departments, but we know for sure it's not even scratching the surface. Thanks.
Ali, I want to go back to one of your slides beforehand. I think it's slide 11. I think you're talking about the demand-driven action that will be utilized, and you spoke a little bit about utilizing the IRAP database. I think yeah, there it is. I think it's the next slide. And I know we have Rachel and James here online. Can you unpack a little bit of that on how we think, as particularly at the city level, that this sort of kind of tools that can be used towards maybe unpacking a little bit more of the demand that's needed to sort of amplify this message? Don't know if Rachel or James is around. James,
Yep.
there you are.
Yeah, hi there. Sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Yeah,
Get it.
I think Carly was mentioning about there in point number 4 about comfortable and safer infrastructure, and perhaps utilizing some of the IRAP's tools to do that. Have you got perhaps anything else that to enlighten the conversation on that part?
Yes, so certainly on that front, it's one of those ones that are tools like the pedestrian star rating and the bicyclist star rating are incorporated within the main assessment, but one of those ones where we want to take it, we have been taking it that stage further and going, well, actually, how can other people utilize them that don't necessarily have the skills or the capabilities to do the full assessment? And so that's where things like Cycle Wrap have come along, where it's just focused at the bicycles. And one more recent one we've been working on with the Alliance of NGOs for Road Safety is a way of actually doing the pedestrian star ratings, but just with a series of very, very simple questions. And off the back of that, then producing the actual star ratings. And of course, that then works very nicely with star rating for schools, which of course doesn't necessarily need to be used around schools. It can be used anywhere. It's about walking and pedestrians. And I think it's once we've got data like that, the actual power of it is absolutely immense, being able to compare and contrast locations, looking at both the individual risk in terms of the star ratings, and if you take it that step further, the collective risks. So that's, where are people dying and being fatally injured the most, and therefore how can we, where do we prioritise and how do we justify road upgrades associated with those? So I think there's a lot of potential down that front to utilise our tools and other people's similar tools as part of this.
Yeah. Thanks, James. And I think, Carly, the next step towards that is, of course, the good old, policy commitment, and then the funding that comes with it, and hence the big gap for us in a lot to do in galvanizing that all together. You've mentioned your big questions about, how do we use our power in numbers to do that. Has anyone else perhaps got some ideas around this? And I think, we're using the brain trust we have in the room. Matt, you got your hands up again, please. Yep.
Yes. If I can add to this, because I think that it's important to realize that this risk approach to unprotected road user is sometimes a little bit complicated, because basically safety is about controlling for the harmful energy. So one thing is to ensure that you have, in those environments that you have walking and cycling, you should not have higher speed than 30 kilometers. And that comes from big areas, but it comes also to these intersections where you have conflicts between car and motorized traffic and unprotected road users. So that is one strategy. If you want higher speed, then you, of course, separation is also a strategy. So that's the basic things. But when it comes to risk, you have to be cautious here, because we have lots of parts of our road transport system which is very unsafe, actually, that if something happens, it will end in a catastrophe, but you can have zero accidents there, because people are they are adjust their behavior. So if you have for example, a street where you have lots of traffic, high-speed traffic or so on, and you don't have so much crashes, because parents and others, they protect their kids from these kind of environment. That doesn't mean it's safe. It doesn't mean that this is good for these unprotected road users. So it's become a little bit more complicated, I think, especially when it comes to urban areas, because for us, safety, especially if you look at that from a kind of Vision Zero point of view, it's something broader than only reducing the risk or whatever, and that's why this kind of data sometimes is not that we're waiting for things that happen when it comes to fatalities. We have to take a much more preventable kind of approach to it, and work more proactively with that. And then we know how safe urban area look like for unprotected road users. So that is what we should measure, and we should communicate that, I think. So that if we do that, then it's go hand in hand with increase the active mobility and safety. Yeah.
Carly, anything to say that?
Yeah, just I agree with you. You know, it's complicated, and I think you know, there's sometimes we try and simplify things down into whether it's a road safety action plan or an African charter for road safety, or in our case, a Pan-African action plan. And we try and simplify things down into the 10 things that you need to do over the next 10 years. But it's so nuanced, right? At neighborhood level, at city level, the politics involved. One of the biggest problems we find in the African context is that highways are being built through communities. So you cannot get the government to agree to have, you're not going to have a 30 speed zone on a highway, but they're also doing footbridges that no one's using, and communities are trying to cross over on a highway. And that's just like one tiny, you know, action area, right? So, and it's so complicated. So yeah, I think it is complicated, and I think all we can do is keep trying to provide that support. I do think at the one of the feedback that I get from governments is that they're overwhelmed by all the things the international community is telling them to do. And I say this all the time whenever I'm speaking about road safety or active mobility. And I think, you know, we have to do better as an international community, and it's hard because we're also donor driven, right? So I'm running an active mobility program. You're in charge of the global decade for road safety on behalf of WHO. We all have an agenda, and there's crossover, but we're going out to sometimes the same decision makers with these different agendas and the 10 things they need to do. Like I keep saying, I don't have the answers, but I think we have to do a bit better at coordinating. And I think these sort of collaborative groups are our only hope of doing that. So if Sani, you've got 5 members on this call or in the community who are all working in Ghana or all working in Tanzania, then the least we can try and do is just understand what we're doing in those countries and be a little bit coordinated.
Completely agree, and I think you know, partnerships and alliances like the CHI can do that. And you know, as the focal point, I try to sort of facilitate that better. But we're also trying to improve, I think, you know, with a bit of more transparency in a website, for example. So working on that in terms of the mapping, for example, where each partner is working at, and like you say, you know, whether it's at the city, country level. What their main thematics would be, and I think that will help partners like you, Carly, to sort of like, you know, enable your work a bit better. From my experience as well, I think, you know, any of these you know, multifactorial initiatives work well when, you know, when we throw sort of the kitchen sink approach to it, meaning it can't just be UNEP or it can't just be sort of FIA Foundation. It needs to be that coordination between civil society, government, of course, even private sector, other philanthropies and so forth. So the success that we've had in other countries, particularly in city level, is exactly that approach, where you start small, using that petri dish, sort of even secondary cities in the Botnar example, to sort of do some intermediate remediations, and then use that agricultural approach towards legislative and policy change, and then it either scales up or replicate or be the exemplar for other cities and countries to look at, and then it spreads from there. So I'd love to hear of some measure of success, as I put in my chat there, from other regions as well, to tackle these big questions that Carly is looking at. And I know, Danielle, you're here and can give that bit of experience as well. Corin, I know you're working on this as well in the Carrick region, and even from the youth perspective as well, right? Globally, you know, Sana, you work on a lot of these things, and now you have some very exciting cohorts coming in with your new round of projects as well. So this is where I think it'd be really good for us and for me as well to sort of like be able to know who's who in the zoo and who's sort of like working in this space, and then that way we will be able to sort of like, you know, coordinate again and sort of compound our approach, whether against, yeah, it's just from another theme, or whether it's from another stakeholder, and help help Carly or your own work, and that's where we sort of want to do that, and we've been successful in some of that coordination. Just literally last night, and I know Kate, you're on the call, but we've had success, for example, in New York. Nancy, I know you're on the line as well. We supported Transport Alternative and Families for Safer Streets in passing Sami's law, right, which would be really good. For 30 kilometers an hour is literally just hot off the presses. That is now going to be funded as well by New York, and again, coalitions such as this, CHI, can play a small part, and I know, you know, the groundwork has always been done by people on the ground, but we sort of supported that at the last ends, where in the game of inches, we created an open letter, which I think I've shared with all of you via the CHI inbox, just calling out to, you know, the Speaker of the House and the policymakers to say that this is important. This is good practice. We're doing it in other countries, and in Amy Cohen's words, she said that really helped, right? So perhaps that, again, that's something, Carly, that we can look at as well, right? From your point of view, when you start to sort of try to influence at the policy level, again, utilizing your strength in numbers approach. But that's just one example, and that's just me speaking from the last sort of win that we had last night, literally. But I'd love to hear perhaps ideas from others for these, you know, kind of channels for influence, as Carly put it. Danielle, yes, please.
Well, I'm talking like from Brazil, right? From the Brazilian reality. What I see on the active mobility at ITDP Brazil is that we do the pilot approach, the pilot and scaling up approach. It's very important, it's crucial, but we also need the high level support. Because sometimes we are on the ground and this is the scale we can get. Like we get the pilot and we get to scale up, you get to the, like I would say, the floor to get organized and build the capacity. But at some point, if you don't have, this is what we see in Rio right now, if you don't have the political, the high level support, like it gets stuck in the pilots, right? Yep. So how do we do need to like have a balance between the on the ground and the high level, and this, I feel like organizations like international organizations they have this power. ITDP is an international organization, but as we work on the ground, we are not seen, right, as this part of this international power, I would say, as like the UNEP, for example. So we do need both the balance and what Carly mentioned earlier too, that we work from, like we have funders, right? And it's been very scarce. Like to work with active mobility in the Latin American reality, it's hard nowadays. You know, we don't have funding for that. So if you could manage to like support with that international arena, that would be great too, because it's really like a lot of electrification work, and nobody wants to talk about walking and cycling, although it's really
I could never understand that, Carly. Perhaps you can enlighten me. I was on a call yesterday too with a couple of my colleagues, and they were like, "Oh yeah, there's like so much money. You know, everyone's talking about electrification and you know, making gigafactories and how do you sort of electrify this and that, but active mobility and walking and cycling is just get a scant." And I think you mentioned, you know, 50 times, you know, I mean, how do we sell that? How do we change that?
There is no industry involved in that.
There's no
Yeah.
industry. There isn't much money to be made. I think it's a bit like, you know, why aren't governments investing in hospitals and schools? And it's, you know, investing in walking and cycling is like a public service. There's no fare to be earned. There's no toll. There's no car to be purchased. So I think that's one side of it. And I also think
Right.
a lot of the transport money out there is climate money. And, you know, we've been talking to the big climate funders, and their methodology for calculating the emission impact is literally based on, there's an internal combustion engine car and now it's an electric car, and that's a huge saving. When we talk about walking and cycling and the potential future journeys saved, and motorization, it's just not in the methodology. And we've been trying to sort of have conversations about changing those assessments, but at the moment it still very much favors the internal combustion engine electric vehicle switch.
So you think there's a
And
research
walking and
gap there
cycling
as
is
well?
no, I think it's
of-
the way that the methodology is, the methodologies need to be updated by the finances for the climate money. And then with road safety, the road safety money, of course, active mobility is part of it, but it's much bigger. So
Yeah.
then we're competing with the helmet money, the seatbelt money, you know, I'm simplifying it, but
Of course.
yeah.
So is it more of a game of which one is worse? Is that what you're saying? Sort of like one car or one bus off, you know, we can.
It's easier to justify and show the emission reduction
Yes, emission
in
reduction.
electric mobility projects than in walking and cycling projects. And, you know, of course, climate is a big part of the argument, but for walking and cycling, it's much wider and it's much more nuanced. So often we don't attract the climate funding.
Right, even though what your presentation say, it's like 1 billion people walking every day.
They're already walking. They're already
Yeah.
walking and cycling. So to put it bluntly, if you keep them safe, it doesn't reduce emissions.
I see.
Exactly, that's totally true.
I can see Daniela and Mats have got their hands up.
Yeah, just feel free to jump in, guys. I think there's not too many people in terms of traffic, so feel free.
Just to complement Carly's approach, then that's totally true. I agree totally, Carly. And what I feel sometimes is that right now, at least in Brazil, we have a big conversation about public transportation, which I feel it's like one of the solutions for road safety too, because you prevent people from buying the 2 or 3 wheelers. That this is what they need actually. They need to access opportunities, and sometimes they are far away. It's not the cycling or walking that's they are going to solve their problem. So I think public transit it's one important piece in this equation. But we also sometimes I feel we need to open up. We only talk about to transportation departments, right? So perhaps the health, like when you talk about active mobility, so perhaps it's the moment to talk about to talk to health departments and like try to shift the narrative. So to be able to compete to the electrification discourse, I think. I don't know, just throwing up an idea here because I really don't have answers as well.
I agree. Yeah. So my background is actually from transport. I used to work for the Swedish Transport Administration, and I agree totally. You know, this cost-benefit analysis and everything like that. If you take time saving, for example, it's time saving for cars. It's not for pedestrians or walking. It's not part of the calculation. So it's really an institution framework around transport that needs to be addressed when it comes to this sort of thing. And I agree totally when it comes to safety. And the thing is that the health sector, they have the individuals and the health sector, they see the burden of this and see the benefits of improving it. But those who can do something about it, they don't see it because it's not part of their calculation. And we have to build a bridge between these things, you know. And I can't see to be honest, I think that the health sector has not been involved in this discussion enough, because they are focused very much on the hospitals and the problems there. They are not so much into prevention, rather.
The well-being aspect of it, yeah.
Exactly. So it's a very complex thing. But when you look at things like the things that Fiona have done, for example, when it comes to physical activity, and you put safety into it, also I see that there's a huge benefit of working with an increased walking and cycling, safe walking and cycling. And if we can together address that, that will be fantastic. But we need to do it. We need to start to discuss this much more strategically around these different models that is used and so on. And I agree also, Daniela, that behind here you also have industry that push for this agenda, that help it, and you don't have that kind of power interest from this walking and cycling people, because they are poor people and so on. But yeah, so it's a huge challenge. But I think we have something here. We have a very good business case. But as you said, Carly, in the beginning, you have been working with this for 10 years or whatever, and we would like to see much more progress on it. But we see that and go from demonstration project to something bigger. But in Europe, this is happened to a large extent, I would say. It's lots of very interesting things that happen. 30 kilometers in big cities and everything. So it's moving at least somewhere in the world. But how can we expand it and make it bigger? That's the challenge now. By the way, I just because I went to a meeting with Fiona with the cycle industry and others. We have to at least bring them in, because there are some business that is interested in more active mobility, and we at least should bring them in and give them a voice, so we get someone who balance a little bit at least these other very strong industry interests that you see.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, right outside. I mean, I'm in Hammersmith in London, but there's Santander Cycle right, a rack right there outside, and then there's Uber and Lime and Bolt and so forth. So micro mobility industry here are quite strong to get into that first and last mile sort of thing. But I know that's nothing compared to the big transport industry. But sorry, Carly, you were going to say something as well.
Yeah, no, actually, I mean, we're seeing even in the Africa context, Uber's investing a lot in sort of micro electric mobility in some of the African cities. We still have a big problem that we don't have the infrastructure for it. So, I think the sooner we can get the infrastructure safe for everyone, the better. I used to use the term leapfrogging, and how can we help the African continent sort of leapfrog the mistakes of the global north and just go straight to the right things to do. And a few sort of ministers and directors of transport in Africa had said to me, it's really insulting to tell us to leapfrog, because you in the global north, you got to make all the mistakes and build cities for cars and have huge road fatalities and congestion, and you worked out the right way to do it, and you took your time, and you're getting there now. So what makes you why don't we get the chance to be human and get it wrong and work it out and get it right? So I never quite know what to do, because on some level I get it, but we also have some of the solutions now. So why spend the next 50 years still getting it wrong? But it's quite interesting. I try not to use the term anymore, because and very much shy away from talking about best practice basically outside of Africa, because it seems to turn people completely off, to be honest. They want to hear about where it's working in Africa, and I understand that. And but I think, just something to think about.
Now that's really interesting. And yeah, I think, there's also that that thinking as well when it comes to climate change, and the likes of India and in China, of course, they wanted, hey, we also want to have our turn in terms of having our big fridges and 2 cars, right? I mean, like, you guys had had your go in economic growth, industrial revolution. Maybe we should make our own mistakes too, and they're like, don't judge us for having a bit more carbon emission for the next decade or so. Yeah, I mean, and in tech as well, you learn a lot about that term as well, leapfrogging. And I've also been burnt a few times by giving some examples where Australia, for example, spent quite a lot of time setting out their broadband and the landlines, and it's like, well, you don't really need to do that anymore with 5G and satellites and so forth. But it's like, oh no, but we want to invest in that, so yeah, it's also in different industries as well. Danielle, you've got your hands up.
Just say that we sold this dream for these people, right? And now we are telling them they cannot buy their cars. So we hear that a lot in Brazil. So
yeah.
But I wanted to say, Carly, that we need more exchange between Africa and Latin America. I think we have a lot to exchange. Yeah.
Completely
and sometimes
agree.
It's easier to convince people to hear because you come from a more similar reality. Yeah.
No, absolutely. Carly, with about 5 to 7 minutes left, what are your plans towards WOOF? You were mentioning that hopefully you're going to have your regional workshops. Do you have a viewpoint at the moment in terms of how this will manifest, and what can sort of we as the CHI sort of partnership can help towards this to make it make sure there's a punchy there at the end?
Yeah, we've put in either through UNEP, the transport team, we've got a cities team, a building team, food and waste management. We've put in a number of submissions from UNEP covering all 7 areas of the categories with WOOF. The deadline's the 22nd of April, so Monday, so there's still time. It takes like 20 minutes to do a submission, so if you think you want to be there or might want to be there, it's normally around 15 to 17,000 participants across the week. So we've put in a number of events, networking events, 1 UN events, urban library publication launches, and a number of our partners have as well. So we'll definitely be launching the action plan. We'll probably do some active mobility capacity building training. There's some stuff happening around sustainable infrastructure. I've been talking to Sheila, Sani, I don't know if you'll see her, or Kate, about maybe FIA Foundation putting something in around true and vehicle emissions. But yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunities, and once we know what we have been successful in having approved, then we'll let everyone know, and there'll be lots of opportunities for sort of the CHI partners to get involved with the UNEP-led events, and vice versa. Maybe we can kind of come up with a list from the other partners as well on who's doing what at WOOF, so we're all aware.
No, fantastic. So at the moment, the team and I are thinking about putting together a reception at WOOF. So that'll be good. So it'll be like a side event. We're piggybacking on our partner from Cities for Children. So that's Sarah Sabri and her team, Save the Children. So just so you guys know as well, what I'd love to see is sort of like a C4C CHI co-event. So I'd love for people to mingle and speak to the likes of World Vision, ARUP will be there, and of course UNICEF and some of the other cohorts. So that'll be a good area for sort of overlap. And Foundation Botnar as well, and the Global Institute Basel, they're always present there, and they have their massive program, Safe and Sound City. That's just been renewed for another 5 years. Again, I'd love to map that out, Carly, and I know they've got some places in Africa as well. So I think, WOOF would be a good place for all of us to meet, and of course also be able to be there to support you. So that would be great. Anyone else got any questions for Carly at the moment? Any pressing matters? Carly, any last statement from you before I close it off?
just that it's great to connect, and feel free to drop me an email if you want to find more. I've put it in the chat, and yeah, that's it. Thanks for the conversation. It's been great.
Thank you so much for everyone's participation and time. And any questions, just please feel free. I can see Carly there have put her email on the chat, or to her and or myself and the team here at FIA Foundation. The next session will be from IRAP, actually. I know Min, I think you're on the line. Min and the team will be sounding about their project on cycle wrap. So again, still along the same lines as active mobility. So that'll be exciting. We're still confirming that, and at the moment, but I think we've got the date set, 17th of June, if I'm not mistaken. I'll extend the invite to everyone as well for that to opt in and join in. But if there's no other comments, thank you very much for your participation, and wishing you a fantastic weekend. Thank you.